Okay, we are back. I'm very happy to have on the Goldstein on Gelt show Dan Kadlec, who's an author, a journalist. Maybe you've seen him in Time, in Money, and he's written for AARP. Perhaps you've even seen him on Oprah. Dan, a real pleasure to have you.
My pleasure.
Dan, I know that one of the focuses and one of the real areas where you help a lot of people is you help parents talk about how to teach their kids about money. So when I was thinking about this, a real life story came up in my office recently, and I wanted to kind of run this by you. I was speaking to a single mother whose children were in their 20s, and she was complaining to me how much they cost her. And I said, why don't you just tell them to grow up and move out? And she said, I can't do that. I have to teach them to be independent. And then I was a little bit floored, and I was wondering, how do you teach a parent like that by helping your child so much, really, you're hampering him?
Yeah, it's an especially interesting question these days, where we have this new phase of life, which we're calling emerging adulthood, where it's not unusual for kids these days to be living at home into their 20s and even up to 30 years old, and being getting some sort of financial assistance. This is kind of the new wave, the new age that we're talking about, the new life phase we're talking about. And so it's not, parents really are struggling with helping their kids launch, and it's a difficult question when you say, look, now you've got to be on your own, and you're going to go to the school of hard knocks, and that's how you're going to learn, versus I'm going to try to bring you along. Now that said, too much assistance is a bad thing, because they obviously need to feel responsibility, or they'll never own it. And it's a very difficult question, though, especially given the economic times when there aren't that many jobs necessarily, and even college graduates aren't making college graduate money. It's tough. It's tough.
All right, so let's focus on this case, because I've seen this kind of thing quite a bit. There comes a stage, I think, when the parents resent the children. And in fact, in the specific case I was working on, the kids were literally causing their mother to bleed financially, which meant that her retirement would be seriously hampered, or be a real problem for her one day. There is a line, in other words. Do you think that?
Oh yeah, no, I'm sorry. There's absolutely a line, and part of it is you have to take care of yourself first. I mean, your retirement comes ahead of your kids' financial, the gifts you're giving them, certainly. But what we've found, in all the cases I've looked at, what we've found is there are parents that do end up resenting it, but it's kind of their own fault sometimes, because they never really present this. They never present it to their kids. A lot of these kids, when I say kids, I mean 18 to 25, they really don't know how taxing they're being on their parents' resources. They've never been told. How can we expect them to know if we don't tell them?
Okay, so that's a great segue into what would be the proper way to, and when should you begin to educate your kids on this topic?
Well, the when is, look, when your child is 5 years old, they should be counting coins, okay? This discussion needs to begin really, really early. Not that you've missed the boat if you didn't do it that early, but certainly they should be brought along all through those younger ages. Now, if you're someone that has teenagers or 18-year-olds or young adults, it's not too late. I mean, you need to bring the subject up, and one way to do it is when you're paying bills and or when you're pulling out your credit card. You say, look, here, I'm buying this thing now, but the bill's going to come later, and here's how that works. And debt management is a huge issue with young people, especially. They don't understand that credit cards aren't free money. They need to be told that. So it's really just looking for moments. Maybe when you're paying the rent or paying the mortgage, say, look, you don't live here for free. Look at this money we're spending. You just kind of go about it that way.
I really love the phrase you said, Dan, emerging adulthood. And I think that one of the problems is that people emerge for way too long, that the emerging can be a 10-year process. And I guess that's the real issue that we have to deal with. It not only causes problems in the family itself, but ultimately those 10 years when these 20-something-year-olds should be starting to save already for the long term, not only are they not putting aside money, but the opposite. They are accumulating debt. Is there a way to explain it to them maybe to wake them up?
Well, entitlement is a problem in anybody. If your kids have this sense of entitlement, they need to be shaken out of that right away. I think we don't want to just throw our kids out there without any sort of safety net, but eventually that's where they're going to be. So you do it gradually. If you have a child that is slow to launch, I think you begin with, okay, you're living here at home. Here's what that means. You need to do this, this, and this as part of living here. In 6 months or in 3 months, you pick the time, you're going to start paying X amount of rent to live here. And guess what? The rent's going to go up every 3 months until you find a job and can move out. In the meantime, you are expected to do some grocery shopping, do some cleaning, whatever. You set the limits, but you do it gradually with enough notice that they have a chance and time to adjust, so that they're not just getting clobbered all at once with, move out. We're done with you.
All right. It's been very nice knowing you. We're talking to Dan Kadlec, who kicked his children out of the house at age 17. No, I'm just kidding. We're talking with Dan Kadlec, who is a fabulous writer. You've probably seen his work in Time and Wall Street work. He's been all over the press talking to people not only about the topic which we've been discussing so far of teaching your kids about money, but also getting people kind of lined up to eventually retire. And let's switch gears a little bit. At what point do you think it's realistic today? I'd like to say when do you think they should start, but when is it realistic for people to really begin creating a retirement plan?
Well, I think it's realistic to start with your first job. And I think we're moving that way. The younger generation is sort of embracing this notion where they have to save. They've kind of got the message, I think, and a lot of millennials, the younger generation has begun saving at the age of like 22. That's on average, versus baby boomers that didn't start saving until they were 35. So definitely they've gotten the message. But the message that I like to deliver is, you need to start with your very first job. You need to start saving 10% of everything you make, and let compound returns do the heavy lifting, and you will be fine. If you start at 21 with your first job with a 401k, contributing enough to get the full company match, I guarantee you, when you're 70, you're going to be fine if you stay with it and don't do silly things like borrow from your 401k or stop contributing when you change jobs or take money out. Avoid all that. Don't worry about bear markets. Just keep putting the money in. Stay diversified. I guarantee you, if you start at 21, you're going to be fine at 70.
So as people are living longer, you said 70 because it used to be you would die at 71, so there was no problem, but no financial problem, let's say. But now people really are living considerably longer. Do you think the definition of retirement has changed?
Well, first of all, the Society of Actuaries just revised its mortality tables, and for the first time ever, a newborn is expected to live to 90. Okay,
wow.
So that's a big deal. If you're 65, you're still expected to live to 87 or 88. So yeah, longevity is an issue. And what you were I forgot your can you expect to retire? You know what? One of my favorite oxymorons of the moment is the retirement job. Most people do not see. I should say they do see employment in their life when they retire. The vast majority see it that way. Many because they think they're going to need it, but others just because they think they're going to want it. So the days of the gold watch and moving to a sunny climate, that's just those days are long gone for the vast majority of people.
So are people just not talking about it, meaning that they don't want it anymore, or they just realize in most cases it's not practical?
In many cases, it's not practical, but we see that in many cases where it is doable, people they like the connections of being, if not at the office, being someplace, and and having some kind of a job gets you out into a place where you're being around people and staying active and. All the studies show how beneficial that is for your health. And obviously, if you can get some sort of a part-time job or even something after you retire that makes your savings go a lot further. So it's actually become sort of the new model. I don't think financial planners these days, I don't think even question it. It's like unless someone's really nailing it, you're expected that you're going to have some kind of employment into your 70s.
Mm-hmm. And it sounds wise. All right, Dan, we've spoken about what young people should do. We've spoken about what old people should do. Now let's hit right in the middle. The middle-aged sandwich generation, people who are being devastated, whose bank accounts are being devastated because their kids are going to school and whose parents didn't save enough money, so now they have to help them. Can you leave us with one parting piece of advice for the middle-aged sandwich generation?
Well, I hate to preach being selfish, but you really do have to take care of yourself. Because no one's taking care of you, so it starts there. We all want to treat our parents with respect and help them as much as we can, and certainly we make sacrifices to do that, and I think you should. But if you're not taking care of your own savings, putting away that money week in and week out, then you're going to end up in a bad spot down the road, and even your parents don't want that, okay? Now, with your kids, again, you want to help them launch, but it's much easier to say, look, there's a limit to what I can do for you. You are young. You can borrow some money. You'll have time to pay it back. You've got your whole future ahead of you. I need to make sure that I'm not a burden to you when I'm 80. Okay, so I'm doing this for you too, and so it's okay to think about yourself.
And I think to add on to that, because I'm not really a big fan of the debt thing, but is they can also just go out and get any job as opposed to a job that they're qualified for, because eventually, I believe, things will smooth out and you'll get the right job for you. But everyone's got to work at some point. You can't just sit at home and
I agree.
Your parents pay for you.
Yeah, and let me say, I'm not a big fan of the debt thing either. My only point is they do have a whole lot of time to sort of get things squared away, and sometimes a little bit of debt is not a bad thing if it's going to help you get more of an education or more training or something that's going to lead to better things down the road. But I couldn't agree more that it's important just to do something and then move on from there. It doesn't really pay to sit around looking for that perfect job.
And I think that is great wisdom to leave our listeners with today. We've been talking with Dan Kadlec, who is an author and a journalist. He writes prolifically in places like Time and in Money and AARP, where he gives great advice to retirees. Dan, in the last few seconds, just tell us, how can people follow you and follow your work?
Yeah, I have a website, dankadlec.com, dankadlec.com, and most of my stuff ends up on time.com as well.
All right, so we will put a link to that at the show notes of goldsteinongelt.com. Dan Kadlec, thanks so much for your time.
Anytime.
You've been listening to the Goldstein on Gelt Show with money maven Doug Goldstein. Doug's weekly radio show is heard around the world, but if you miss it, you can download the podcast at www.goldsteinongelt.com. The Goldstein on Gelt Show gives you up-to-date financial ideas so you can get on the path to financial freedom. If you'd like your questions answered on the air or off, send Doug an email to doug@profile-financial.com. It's your money for your future, so join Doug every week to build your wealth on the Goldstein on Gelt Show.